I warned you at the beginning of the week that we were starting the week off with a red bar in these weekly time frames. This is what the weekly chart looked like before our rebound. You see the little red arrow? Means we're closing below the cloud. We're pushing below the cloud. This was the lows of the session here on Thursday. Okay? Rebound. I was watching to see, would we get this reversal of conditions in the weekly time frame? We did take out the 10-week moving average, the red line. I told you we had the red bar. Nasdaq was rolling over and breaking the 80 level. Told you about this. I was warning a reversal was coming 3 weeks ago when we had that peak on July 10th. On July 11th, I thought that was the peak. Off resistance. 9-count sell signal. All the things I talked about. We didn't end up with this signal, but I wanted to show it to you because we had it. We'll likely get it. Because we didn't get it, I think you can recover and get a bounce. Here's how we closed on Friday with the Nasdaq weekly chart. Nasdaq 100 closed below the 10-week moving average. That's bearish. Okay. We closed with the red bar. That's bearish. But we didn't take out the cloud. We had bounced off that 20-week moving average, and we didn't get a reversal of conditions. So if we can rebound going into next week, there's a good chance that we attempt to rebound off of this trend line right here. And again, with the linear scaling, it's directly below. Okay, so we might hit that, take out the 20, or even violate the trend line, and then attempt to rebound back up over the next couple weeks or maybe several weeks, depending on how long it takes. If we attempt to fill those gaps, you break this level, you start taking out the 20-week moving average, the 100-day and the daily, then forget it. Going lower back to the 17,000 area on the Nasdaq and the 50-week moving average and the 200-day and all the rest of it. Now, let me just say this. You get a red bar. Oftentimes you'll get a red bar, and on the first, second, or third bar, sometimes you'll attempt a recovery. Okay? The fact that we didn't turn the cloud red suggests maybe that might be the case. Next week, we close down below the trend line. We close down below the 20-week, and we see the bearish reversal of conditions. We see everything just, technical support is totally taken out. You're going to bounce right here, okay? I think a bottom's going to form. And again, oftentimes the second or third bar, you can get a rebound back up, or you get it with the first bar. I still think we're going to try to recover and fill those gaps. No guarantee if we break support, but I think you got a good shot at bouncing off support. I wanted to share that with you. MACD roll over for Nasdaq, but not on the S&P 500. So again, I still think you got a shot at a rebound. I think we could see a rebound as soon as Monday or Tuesday, or maybe with the Fed. Those divergences could form come Monday. Future 4-hour charts are looking very similar. Bring up the futures of the S&P. Nasdaq looks the same. You're getting this, you're getting a rebound. You're going to come down and get this divergence that's going to develop into the Monday session in all likelihood. But probably Monday, Tuesday, I think you got a good shot at a divergence. No guarantee. Maybe it just goes positive and that's the end of it. But I think you can form a divergence. No guarantee the divergence sets up. As I said on the 60-minute chart, think you got a good shot. Show you the 60-minute charts again in this video. I think that's possible. Nevertheless, I digress. And here is the weekly chart of the S&P. Again, I warned you on Monday that we had a red bar. We ended with a red bar. We had tried to get red bars previously. Didn't happen, but I told you, again, we're going to get a bigger sell-off. You got to get a reversal of conditions and take out the 20-week. Here we got a reversal of conditions and we bounced out the 20-week. So again, do both. You got to get the red cloud. You got to drop below the 10-week. Here we're bouncing off the 10-week. Nasdaq's trying to bounce off the 20-week. So again, we'll see what happens. S&P, if it can rebound, it's going to go to a new high. Diverge with Nasdaq. You've got beautiful divergences that are now starting to play out. Warned. Support, if we can bounce, put in a short-term bottom. We don't bounce and we start breaking these levels and taking out the 20-week, here the 10-week, getting reversal of conditions and doing all kinds of technical damage. Those remain bearish, then forget it, look out below. It's about support and resistance. About knowing the future, it's about predictions based on probability. That's what it's about. I'm telling you, we're coming into a level of support. As I told you, we were coming into a level of resistance. But the sell-off that was before the sell-off happened, I'm telling you, we're coming into a level of support. We'll see what happens. Does it hold or do we break it? Institutions keep selling, or do they stop and we see the buy the dip crowd come back in and run it back up to fill the gaps? So that's going to be the case. We'll see what happens. I'll do another video on Sunday talking about some of my other signals, so check back. I just wanted to talk about these weekly signals, the daily charts and the 60-minute charts, and just show you what I'm looking at, the divergences that may form, maybe they don't. We'll see what happens. Levels of support. So check back on Sunday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. I'll have another video with other indicators that I'm not showing in this video. Support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like this information, please consider partnering with me by helping out, supporting the channel today. Let me know you want this information, that you like this information. It takes a lot of time and effort. This is just stuff I look at every single day, but I got to put it in a video. It takes me a lot of time to do this. Sharing with you some amazing signals. But I just put it all out there for free and just ask that you step up to the plate and do what you can to help out. I don't want to sell you a bunch of stuff, but I do need help in order to make it work. So please, moment, link below and support the channel. Anything helps. I would really appreciate it if you take a moment to do that. Thank you for your consideration for that. Check back on Sunday for my other video. Got some really important things to show you. I'll be shorter, hopefully, on Sunday and to cover some of these important signals. Bottom could be developing around the levels of support we're going to look at in this video. We'll be watching. You break these levels, forget it. We're going lower. Bounce off these levels, that's going to be bullish. The previous 2 weeks, everybody was extremely bullish. Last week, we just had the largest drop, the largest one-day drop since 2022. I think it was October. Told you back at the 20-week moving average that, again, we were either going to rally up and go up and get a lower high or go make a higher high, push into some of the trend lines of resistance or overthrow them. Overthrowing them, about some of these other trend lines, the diversion scenario was playing out. The Nasdaq was likely peaking. Peaked on July 10th. I told you on July 11th we had a 500-point drop. We had a reversal day. I told you Nasdaq had likely peaked and diverged with NVIDIA. Nasdaq has likely put in a top. S&P, probably not yet. Probably end up diverging. But it was last week, but the week before that, and the week before that, the previous 2 weeks, there in early July, everybody, no possible way the stock market is going down. On social media, no way. I told you we are going to go up. I kept telling you my signals are bullish, but then I told you we peaked in July 10th that there was a warning signs, daily time frame, that they were going to reverse. I showed you those sell signals. Laid out. We've now seen this drop. On July 10th, we closed above the upper Bollinger Band. I told you that to be watching for a close back below it. We got a 9-count sell signal. We had the 9-9 the previous 2 weeks, and I told you again, signals were likely going to amount to a reversal. July 11th, we got that reversal with the CPI, and again, cooler data, the market sold off. Ended up rebounding on the hotter PPI inflation data. I told you sometimes these things, they defy logic. I told you on July 11th that the Nasdaq had likely peaked that day before on July 10th. I told you it was probably starting a bear market. S&P, I told you at that time, could still make a new high. It ended up doing that with the rebound back up. I predicted with this move back to the 10 period that we'd go back up to the 78.6 Fibonacci into the golden pocket. We went up and we hit the 78.6 Fibonacci right on the nose on the intraday chart. I drew it out before we ever reached it. We were going to get a lower high and then we were going to start a collapse. Exactly what happened. Told you going into that peak that, again, my signals remained bullish. With the corrections here and over here, I had warning signs of the pullback here. Didn't change my trend signals. My trend signals remained bullish. I told you that over and over again, and I told you that I was looking for a move, upper channel lines and trend lines in the weekly time frame, or to overthrow them. We ended up overthrowing them. I told you more trend lines. I told you NVIDIA likely peaked on June 20th. I continue to point that out over and over again. It diverged with Nasdaq. Nasdaq moved to a new high. And again, I told you that is likely a top for the Nasdaq, as I continue to point out over and over again. Signals predicted we would go higher. Even though I was looking for a top, I kept telling you my signals remain bullish. My signals remain bullish. Then I warned you about the topping signals and the divergences. And those signals played out, and then again called the top on CPI sell-off, predicted a lower high at the golden pocket there, the 78.6 Fibonacci, predicted a sell-off. Warned you that Bitcoin was bottoming and the stock market was topping with these signals right here. Do you see these signals? I talked about them when they formed right here on the Nasdaq daily chart, July 8th, July 10th, July 11th. These signals warned, and momentum flipped right after that. I warned you when that happened. Warned you about the pullbacks over here, but told you we were not able to flip my trend signals back to bearish. These were just pullbacks right here, and then we resumed and got bullish signals after the bearish ones here. We get bearish sell signals here, and red bars reverted right back to bullish, and the advance resumed forming this divergence. I told you I thought a divergence was developing. Okay, my signals remain bullish. My signals remain bullish. Be watching for divergence. Weekly time frame. Signals played out. And now we've dropped 9.5%. Well, the S&P got the bearish MACD cross in the weekly time frame. The S&P dodged that. It had done that at the lows of the session, at the lows of the week, but we rebounded. And again, I told you I was watching earlier in the week. I was watching this trend line to see if we close back above it. We closed pretty much right on the trend line there. MACD was bearish. It prevented the crossover. Still may get it, but we still may rebound. You know, we might start going lower initially. We still might go lower, but we could still rebound and go higher. We did over here. Again, Nasdaq got a lower high over here. S&P, it went higher. Nasdaq bounced off the 20-week moving average. S&P is not there yet. Nasdaq is at the 20-week. S&P may not make it. They're breaking the trend line decisively and taking out the 20-week moving averages. Then again, you're probably going to get a bigger sell-off, and the signals will remain bearish. I think you got a pretty good shot that you're going to attempt a recovery and go back and fill the gaps. I think S&P will move to new high. We sold off 2 weeks here, and then we rebounded back up the next few weeks and got a new high. You could see something very similar. I told you we could be hanging out around this area for a little while in an overall topping process. People so complacent around tops is because they take their time forming, and then they go, well, it didn't form yet, so it's not going to form. They to a false conclusion. Fed's going to pivot. We know a top is likely going to form. I think it already had formed. It already has formed on Nasdaq. The S&P, I think the jury's still out, but my guess is that the gap's going to get filled because it was at the very top and at the top for Nasdaq. Often, as I say, diverge at tops. They diverged at this top. They diverge at tops and bottoms all the time. Divergence between them at a recent high, you can get a larger formation of the divergence here in the weekly time frame. This is still going to play out. Now, maybe that plays out immediately. Maybe we just start seeing the bottom fall out of the stock market like we did with Bitcoin, and we saw this big drop. Okay, and then Bitcoin predicted the bottom there in early July, and it's now playing out, and we're rebounding back up. Signals have been nailing the tops and bottoms of Bitcoin. You gotta, sometime before you die, go watch one of my Bitcoin videos. The signals are absolutely amazing. Just caught another bottom with Bitcoin with yesterday's low. I think it's going up to resistance, but then I think it's going to diverge with S&P. If it breaks out, that's extremely bullish. If it doesn't, if it reverses there, that's going to be very bearish for Bitcoin and likely massive divergence between the stock market and Bitcoin. We'll see if the market plays catch up with Bitcoin or if we go up a little bit higher. Do we break these levels decisively or do we try to bounce off them? And that's where we're at. A break, if the institutions break these levels, keep going down, then again, remain bearish. If we try to bottom around these levels, I'll turn back to bullish. All about support and resistance. Earlier in the week, we might try to close back above this trend line because we had broke it, and we did close just right on the trend line. S&P still might get a divergence here on the RSI, and again, we might see what happened over here with the MACD where it got a bearish cross with this first divergence, but then again, it ended up higher and forming another reference point. We could see that here. It could roll over, and we could end up going higher and still get another divergence. S&P was up 1.11% on Friday. We had dropped below the trend line briefly and then got above it. That's what you saw there on the weekly chart. Again, the head formation may not be here. It may be at higher levels if we can go to a new high. My guess is that's probably going to be the case. If all my signals begin to turn back to bullish, you can have the RSI come up here and make a brand new divergence, or you can form a multiple divergence off of the previous peak over here. It can play out either way. You get a decisive break of this level. The risk is we come all the way back down here to the 4,900 area or 200 period like Bitcoin did. The S&P and Nasdaq play catch up with Bitcoin, again, they have a positive correlation. Bitcoin's rebounded back up. I told you the stock market was kind of sell off. They currently have a negative correlation. Actually, it's going to go back to a positive correlation. But again, we break these levels. This is where we're going. You bounce here, you buy more time. It's as simple as that. Nice divergence at the peak there. I told you about that at the time. This followed. MACD rolled over. There was no divergence. We had one on the RSI, but not on the MACD. We're still in positive territory. We'll see if we try to rebound. We added an inverted hammer on Thursday. That might be a bottom. Nasdaq moves to a new low and S&P doesn't. We'll see what happens. I think you're going to move to a new low and for the divergences on those 60-minute charts. Break here. Looks like we closed slightly above the trend line, just jumping back above the trend line ever so slightly. Nasdaq's now becoming oversold. So again, I think there's a good shot that we're going to try to form a bottom. Maybe Thursday's low. Maybe we go one more dip, a shot of a bottoming process. S&P's probably going to go make new highs. Rallies of the last 2 days have been sold. So again, and we're now getting the 10 crossing the 20 period moving average. So again, it's still possible we go a little bit lower, closer to our 100 period moving average. And maybe that trend line, we go down, we break it, but then we redraw it like we did at the October 23 low. The trend line broke and then it readjusted itself. S&P's got a shot at a little double bottom here. If Thursday's low can hold with a higher low, we gapped higher. We'll be watching. Does the gap fill and this low holds, or do we go take it out? I think we're going to probably go lower and end up forming a divergence early on next week. And then I think we can bottom surrounding the Fed. What happens? I'll be watching. Do divergences form on the MACD and the RSI on these 60-minute charts? If they do, then we get one more push lower, likely mark a bottom. Nasdaq can bounce up the confluence of support. 3 weeks ago, everybody was bullish. I told you we were going to go higher, but I warned you the 8th or the 11th that the Nasdaq was going to turn. 11th, I told you it probably just topped because of these trend lines and the channel with the pandemic low over here, and again the October 2022 low. I told you we had this topping tail right there. What I'm trying to say is people say it after the fact. Very few people have the guts to say it. Hey, we're slamming into resistance. A top is forming right now, and we're going to turn. Prior to that, I tell you, my signals remain bullish. My signals remain bullish. My signals remain bullish. And then when we had the topping signals, I warned you about them, and I said we closed above the upper Bollinger Band. For a close back below it, we got it with the CPI. We could get a sell-off with the inflation data if it was good news. It happened, and then we got the hotter inflation data with the PPI coming down to a level of support where we may bounce. We may bounce here off the 20-week or overthrow it a little bit and hit this trend line. We overthrew it a little bit over here, and we hit the trend line. If you overthrow the 20-week up over here and here, so I think you're going to hit this trend line with the linear scaling. The log scaling, we're hitting it right now. Maybe that's it at the 20-week, but I think we're going to go lower and form the diversions, but then I think we're going to bottom and come back up here to 20,400, probably overthrow it and get a lower high and fill those gaps, and I think the S&P will probably move to a higher high. Everybody was telling you, oh no, the Nasdaq's on its way to 25,000, S&P's going to 6,000. I showed you this topping tail, and I told you the very next week we'd likely see a big ugly red bar. What did we get? A big ugly red bar. Before it happened that we were looking for evening doji star, and that's exactly what formed. And then I told you to be watching for a confirmation follow through. This week we got the confirmation. If we continue to breach the trend line and start and we continue to soften, we breach the trend line, the 20-week, much bigger sell-off like Bitcoin did. But it's very possible that we had those gaps that we still make an attempt to go back up and fill them. So we're at a crucial level of support where institutions are going to make a decision. Are we going to break support and go a whole lot lower? If so, I'll remain bearish. But if we bottom and bounce here, which I think we're going to do, then I'll turn back to bullish. And then you're going to hear me say, my signals remain bullish. My signals remain bullish. If they turn back to bullish, that's what you're going to hear me say. We're going back up to fill the gaps. You're going to hear weeks of that probably. Try to bottom with the Fed. The Fed gives us tops, bottoms, and continuations of the trend. I'm telling you, we've got a good shot of a bottoming process developing. I told you over here, you had a good shot that was the top. On July 11th, I thought that the July 10th peak was the top, and saying that ever since. I'm looking at these resistance levels. S&P is probably going to go make a new high and diverge in the weekly time frame with the Nasdaq. Herd is starting to turn bearish, will probably turn down a little bit more, but I think you can bottom out, rebound at support if support can hold. Did you hear what I just said? Great Scott. Did you hear what I just said? If if it's all about support and resistance. If support breaks, guess what? You're going lower. If you bounce, guess what? You're going to bottom and go higher. I was predicting that we had peaked here with this topping tail and that we are going to sell off. The divergences in the weekly time frame were warning that was about to happen. I'm telling you, just as I warned you, top was developing 3 weeks ago on July 8th through July 11th. I'm telling you right now, you've got a shot at a bottom. Could be under construction, but if we break the support, forget it. We're going to go a whole lot lower. At a confluence of support and our 100 period moving average and our 20-day moving average, 20-week moving average here in the weekly time frame. So if we bounce, I'm going to turn back to bullish. We're constantly talking about the gaps filling, and I'm going to be telling you if my signals turn back to bullish, then I'm going to tell you my signals are bullish. We're going to go back and fill the gaps. I think Nasdaq's peaked, but again, we're in a topping process. And a topping process takes time. Nasdaq weekly chart here. Just as we are hitting resistance between July 8th and July 11th, as I talked about at the time, we're now hitting some support. On the linear scaling, it's a little bit lower, the trend line, but we'll be watching these levels. I think you got a good shot that we're going to bounce there and go fill those gaps. And then we're going to turn down. Still think we're going to turn down and end up getting a sell-off if we get a counter trend on Nasdaq and maybe move to new highs on the S&P 500. Talked about the log scaling, and again, I told you, the trend line right here, we overthrew it. Now I've just reconnected it here in the log scaling, but we overthrew it just a little bit here in the log scaling, and I told you we're either going to go up to it or overthrow it. What do? We went up to it, and then we overthrew it, and we hit those other trend lines we just saw in the linear scaling. Back down to the low here and the high over here and further back down to the pandemic. I just showed it to you. So here we have a rising wedge. The linear scaling, we have that channel and the larger channel. We have two channels, smaller channel, the larger channel. Here we have the rising wedge. And here, again, I think the head and shoulders is in play. I think the top is likely in. But if you bounce here, I think you'll get something that looks like this over here. So that's what I think is going to happen. And again, I talked about the MACD. Look at the MACD. MACD is now rolling over. Well, it rolled over here too with this divergence, but then it turned back up and it took its time, and we had this topping process where Nasdaq got a lower high and S&P got a higher high. Nasdaq went up and came back up and got a test of this peak. I think you're going to see the same thing here. We came down to the 20-week moving average and we danced around the 20-week for a little while. It took a couple weeks and then we finally went up there. Think you could see the same thing. I think when we go up to the 20,400 area, I think we'll overthrow it. You'll have a lower high in all likelihood set up. But we could see something similar. Now, let me just say this. Are you listening? Listen carefully. Now, support and resistance. If we follow Bitcoin lower right now, as Bitcoin had already had the drop, and I predicted that it had bottomed. July 5th low, my signal turned back to bullish and we got the bottoming process. See those signals, go look at my Bitcoin video, my latest one at the end of this one. Amazing. I've shared with you with the Nasdaq back there early July. If we break this level, then yes, you can keep going. My guess is you're probably going to try to bounce. I make predictions based on probability. Nobody knows the future, technical analysis, we don't do fake fortune telling. We look at probability, we look at support and resistance levels, and we look at mathematically based indicators. But I was looking back at when I called that top on July 10th, that peaked as a peak on July 11th, showing you the things I'm showing you right now. Very few people have the guts to do that. I'm telling you, we're at a level of support. We're at a confluence of support. A chance we're going to go a little bit lower or maybe try to bounce right here off of this week's low and try to rebound. Guesses that's probably going to be the case. Thus, I'll turn back to bullish, close out my short positions, and go long. Start breaking this level, and the slide continues like it did with Bitcoin, then again, you can set up the head and shoulders immediately, or we can go up, fill the gap, and then you can come back down and see something like that. Going into a sell-off, going into the September 18th meeting, you're going to get your Fed pivot, and then we can get the right shoulder surrounding that. You get a bounce. Historically, that's what's happened. But then the bottom falls out of the stock market after that. Again, pivot historically has given us small bounces, as I've previously have talked about. I'm trying to tell you, got a good shot at bottom. It's developing. I told you in Thursday's video, it could form Friday if we went lower. We did not. I think you got a shot at a divergence. If we see that Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, You can bottom surrounding the Fed just before it or with the Fed. We break this level and we start seeing a significant drop here, then look at the 17,000 area. That would be extremely bearish. A bounce here would be extremely bullish. Now with the log scaling, we're already hitting the trend line. With the linear scaling, we are not quite there yet with the Nasdaq. A bottom. Now with the linear scaling, we can go a little lower. With the log scaling, we're there. We'll see what happens. Again, over here, you overthrew the 100-day moving average a little bit. I think you're probably going to do that. I think you're probably going to overthrow it. Maybe, again, we come back and fill this gap I've been talking about, 18,653, and overthrow our 100-period moving average, the linear trend line. So I think that you could do that, but I think that we're bottoming. Do you see the extreme move that's reached here? When we had that extreme move here, you were in this bottoming process. Again, we trying to bottom around the 100-period moving average. Could this low from Thursday be it? Possibly. For evidence, we got a candle of indecision. We've had these rallies back up. It kind of fizzled out a little bit. And again, I've revised my Elliott Wave count. I have two counts. One is that we're bottoming. The other one is that maybe we get one more push down. I'm looking at probability, not know the future. I'm just looking at support and resistance and probability. Hold off 9.5%. I think we could go a little bit lower, rebound, but it's possible Thursday's low was it. Need to see evidence of that. If we break through these levels, then look out below. I hope you hear what I'm saying. It's about support and resistance. It's not about the future. It's about support and resistance levels and predictions based on probability. I know the Fed's going to pivot, so I know to be looking for a top because I know historically that's what's happened. That's probability. We hit a trend line up here on the Nasdaq and we were at the upper Bollinger Band and we closed below it and we hit that and reversed off of two different trend lines that I just showed you on the weekly chart. I know based on probability, hey, we probably have peaked there. About probability, folks. Again, I think we're in a likely a bottoming process. Whether the bottom is in or not, it's too early to tell. We'll be watching. Got a candle of indecision there with a rebound on Friday with the PCE inflation data. I eventually think that we could bottom out and come back and fill this gap. If we're moving into a bear market, it's likely that gap is going to fill. Okay, that's why I think that we could bounce here. If we do bottom out surrounding the 100 and the 20-week moving average and the trend line, I think we can rally back up and again, the gap and then resume the selling, but get a bearish. Now, if we continue lower, look at the Fibonacci's from the low over here to the high over here, our Fibonacci retracement. Right now, we're at the 50% retracement area. We've just moved beyond it, just above our 100-period moving average. If we go a little bit lower, guess where we can go? Our 61.8 Fibonacci at the 18,000, just under 18,400 to 18,392. Okay, the gap fill is at 18,653. If we get one more drop, you might hit the 61.8 Fibonacci and then rebound and come back and try to take out that trend line. Do you see what I'm saying? If we do, we can move down towards the linear trend line, maybe even overthrow it a little bit if we do go to the 61.8 fib. And again, no guarantee we do that, but again, it's a very common retracement, the 61.8 fib and 78.6 Fibonacci's. Deeper than that, then again, you're going to get a decisive break of the trend line. I think that you could break it, but then get back above it. We'll be watching. Again, it's very possible that we bottom here. It's still possible we get those divergences on the 60-minute charts. There's no divergence. Well, there wasn't a divergence over here at the April low either. To get a divergence, I'll be watching the Fibonacci retracements. I'll be watching the trend line, and I'll be watching to see can we get back above the 50 period. You got the gap resistance just above 50, the 50 period right there. The gap fill here, and then the gap fill up here at 20,400. Break. The decision's going to be made by the institutions. Are they going to stop selling, and are we going to break the trend line and go lower in the weekly time frame on the daily chart over 2023 low, or are we going to bounce off of it and go back and fill these gaps? That's the decision that's going to be made. It's going to be the bigs, the folks with the big money that's going to make that decision, because if they want to push it lower, they can. They got the money to do it. Do is just keep selling and dumping positions. Let it rebound back up. Maybe a 10+% drop. If Thursday's low can hold a 9.5% drop, then maybe we can go back up and fill these gaps. I think it's probable and likely that we're going to do that. But if we break support, then you got to remain bearish. If we bounce, you got to turn back to bullish. I said, with the log scaling, we're already hitting the trend line and the 20-week moving average. We're just above, Thursday's low was just above the 100-day moving average. That's the pink line right here. Okay, and log scaling here in the daily time frame, we didn't quite reach it. So again, if we bounce off of it with the log scaling and the 20-week moving average, then maybe that's all she wrote and we're going to start a reversal. But it still could be that we come down and we hit this trend line a little bit lower, maybe even slightly violate it, and again, hit that 61.8 Fibonacci at the 18,400 area, just under 18,400. Maybe get a bottoming tail or something and try to bounce off of the 100 period moving average and the trend line. Maybe we just hit it right on the nose. But we are hitting the log scaling, so we'll be watching to see if that's all she wrote. If you do see further selling, you get a divergence on the 60-minute charts. You might hit this trend line and you might try to form a bottom. You break this level, again, you can keep going. Or if we bounce and then we break this level. If you break this level, that's a technical level of support that's being violated that's going to take us back towards 17,000, back towards the 200 period moving average. That's what Bitcoin did. It broke those levels. Maybe the market does that too. Bitcoin trades around the clock, so you didn't have to deal with the gaps. We had the gaps because the stock market does not trade around the clock. Maybe those gaps get filled. We'll see what happens. Nasdaq had the little head and shoulders pattern I told you about. Again, this right shoulder might be lopsided if we tried to fill the gap immediately. We did not. We had this little head and shoulders. It measures down right here to the 18,400 area. Here's the gap fill up the 18,600 area. Still may be that we get one more dump down and form some divergences on things like the RSI. Let's turn back up, but this could just be a counter trend right now. And by the way, I warned you about pring parameters, negative divergence at that peak when we hit it there on July 10th and 11th. I talked about this divergence at great length and detail. And again, beautifully. Possible we form a bottom soon if support can hold. Did you hear the word if? If support can hold. I hope you hear what I'm saying. Doesn't hold, guess what? We're going to go a whole lot lower. Don't make those decisions. The institutions are the ones that if they're going to stop selling, we'll rebound. The dip crowd will come back in and we can cover short position. It'll create buying, flip the trade back from bearish to bullish. That can fill the gaps. Break these levels of support and the institutions continue to sell. We're going to get a much bigger sell-off. They control things. I'm going to show you my Elliott Wave count. Don't read into it. I don't trade Elliott Wave, okay? I use Elliott Wave to validate or invalidate things that I'm looking at. I'm looking for a possible 5-leg push lower. Because if we do get a 5-leg push lower, it's likely you're going to get an ABC and not be able to move to new highs. Probably come back, fill this gap at 20,400, and that's going to be the end of it. Nasdaq topped on July 10th, and it's already begun the bear market, and we'll get a counter trend. Read into my Elliott Wave count. My count can easily be invalidated. I don't trade Elliott Wave. I hope you don't. I get counts that get invalidated all the time. This is speculation, okay? Just use it to say, okay, well, if we get a 5-leg push, maybe we get a rebound of a 3-leg push higher, counter trend. I changed my count. I was looking one more push lower, and I had it marked as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I was looking for one more push lower. I think that this is more likely, but no guarantee it's right because, again, it's just speculation. So do with it what you want. I'm just looking at it as possible 1, 2, which, again, I predicted when we had this turn right here, this divergence. I told you, again, that day on July 11th, that July 10th was probably the peak. You're turning off those levels of resistance. That's why, because you had all these signals that were bearish right at that level of resistance. The Nasdaq had topped. Nevertheless, I digress. I told you we were likely going to bounce after that 500-point sell-off and hit the 78.6 Fibonacci. What did we do? We went right up and hit the 78.6 Fibonacci. Then I told you we were going to get a lower high, and then we were going to start breaking down. And what had happened? We broke down. I'm telling you, got a shot at a bottom if we can bounce at these levels of support. My guess is we're still going to go lower and form a divergence here on the RSI and the MACD. I could be wrong about that. The bottom may have been in on Thursday. Guess is that we're going to likely get one more push down and form this divergence on these 60-minute charts because we went to a new extreme low, and I've talked about that earlier in the week. Today's low may be it. My guess is it's not. I could be wrong. I'm looking for a bottom. Break these levels of support. Guess what? I'm no longer looking for a bottom. I'm looking for a bigger sell-off. You're going to come down to these levels, and that trend line with the linear scaling, I think you're going to fill a gap right here at 18,653, and I think you're going to try to bottom. Again, maybe you go as low as that 18,400 area towards our 61.8 Fibonacci of the previous advance. I don't know that we make it there. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Who knows? I'm looking for a bottom here, probably taking out previous low here, moving down to fill this other gap, and again, hitting the trend line of support. Do that, then we bounce